What's up guys, welcome to the first video posted on the Crespo Photo YouTube channel apart from the trailer, and this one's actually one I've been planning to make for a little while, but I figured this channel would be more appropriate than any to post it on, and it's going to be talking about a very good cost-saving measure if you're getting into film photography, but also one that you're going to have to kind of think differently about. So you read the title, and I'm talking about expired film. Now, obviously, why would I recommend shooting on expired film? I don't recommend eating expired food, so why would I recommend shooting on expired film? Well, there's quite a few reasons, and the first big one is going to be the cost. So I recently went and bought 3 rolls of Fujifilm, and that cost me almost $20. Now, it's brand new film, it's your regular color negative process, you can get it developed at most places that can do color process, but it's 20 bucks for 3 rolls. And if you want to do anything specialized like Ektachrome, God help you, a single roll of Ektachrome costs $13. And if you're shooting, oh God, if you're shooting medium format, forget about it. There are some rolls that aren't super expensive, but either way, you'll notice when you first get into film photography that the biggest cost apart from the initial investment in the camera is going to be the film and the developing. And usually the film is the biggest cost. But when you shoot expired film, it will save you quite a lot of money if you don't buy it off of eBay, because everybody seems to think that putting the word expired on something on eBay means that it's going to be worth more, which it isn't. Unless it's something specialized like Ektachrome 64T, in which case the prices for those are outrageous. Actually, to be honest, any slide film or medium format film that's expired, especially if it's slide film, forget it. It's going to cost you way too much. But 35mm, people don't really seem to care about. For example, this roll was literally given to me. I say roll, this is a brick. This brick was literally given to me, and it's just a bunch of Kodak Gold, all of which expired in about 2001. And I'm sure that sounds great in the microphone. But it was just given to me. Nobody wanted it. They're like, I don't care. And actually, I was recently given a roll of this Timex P3200, which will be kind of difficult to shoot on, and I'll talk about why in a minute, but it's actually really cool, and it was really neat. This expired in 1996, so it's got quite a bit of age to it. It's black and white. It's just cool. And there are actually companies out there like Film Photography Project, not sponsored or anything, but hey, if you want to, that'd be awesome. But they actually repackage old slide film that was cold stored, it's military surplus, and they sell it as what they call retrochrome. Now this is their 320, but they also make a 400, and it's really cool because you get kinds of slide film that really aren't made anymore. Right now your only slide film option is 100 speed, but when you shoot with these, it's actually the higher speed options you could get from years past. And it doesn't cost nearly as much as buying brand new slide film, though if you get it repackaged like this and hand rolled, it does come with a bit of a premium. However though, with the saving money portion does come a different challenge, which is actually finding it. I was lucky enough to be given quite a few rolls of, well, a lot of rolls of expired film because it was just sitting around. And unless you're willing to spend that sort of overpriced amount on eBay for expired film, chances are the only places you're going to find certain films is browsing some antique stores, or perhaps being given some by family members who know that you're into photography. And really, that's the biggest challenge when it comes to obtaining this film, is either spending too much because people on eBay seem to think that expired means that it's worth like a $15 premium, or just trying to find some in general, and that's sort of a challenge. But if you find some, that's awesome, because that means that you have now saved a ton of money on film that is old and has benefits and disadvantages, and we'll get into the second benefit right now. So the second benefit, of course, is the fact that it's going to teach you a lot more about shooting on film than I think most people would learn if you just throw a regular roll in there and get rolling. Pun intended. But when you throw a regular roll of 400 speed film from Kodak into your camera, you set the ISO and you just shoot with the light meter, and that's it. But when you shoot with expired film, there's a bit of a different process to it, because yeah, you can just throw it in there and set your camera to the correct shutter speed and the correct ISO and you're ready to go. But for a lot of people who only ever really pay attention to the little light meter that tells you here's what you need to be at, go take a picture, you're never going to learn anything about the difference with stops of light, or how shutter speed affects things, or how age affects the film. I'll give you an example here. The first few photos that I actually ever took on expired film, the film was so far gone. It wasn't even funny. It was so bad. And I got a really unique look out of it because it was this brown, grainy look, but you'll notice all the shots are underexposed. Now, for somebody who's never shot on any sort of cameras before, doesn't know anything about photography, the one stop of light is probably just going to go right over your head. But Let me explain exactly what that means. When you throw a roll of 400 speed film regularly into a camera like my Pentax K1000, for example, there's a light meter adjustment that you set to the speed on the film. Some cameras actually do this automatically, but in this case it's manual. But once that's set, that means you've calibrated the light meter to tell you when the shot is perfectly exposed. But when you're shooting on expired film, obviously that's not going to be accurate. So if I'm shooting on a 10-year-old roll of 400 speed film, that means that I have to adjust it by 1 stop for overexposure. So that means that when I go to set the camera, instead of setting it to exactly 400 as printed on the film, I actually need to set it to something closer to ISO 200. That way, when you go to actually take the picture, the light meter to you is doing the same thing it always does, but to the film, you are actually deliberately overexposing. I made this mistake the first time I ever shot because I set it exactly to what it was supposed to, and all my shots came out underexposed. And if you're shooting on expired slide film like Ektachrome, this becomes even more important because when you shoot on slide film, you can't really play too much with the exposure. You have to nail that exposure. Otherwise, you're going to get no detail in the blacks or you're going to overblow the whites in the shot. You can play around a little more with exposure on negatives just because there is a little bit more of forgiveness in the highlights and the darks. But with slide film, especially when it's expired, you really have to nail that exposure. You have to nail the exposure even with regular slide film. So I wouldn't recommend shooting expired slide film unless you have a lot of experience and a huge pair between your legs. And that's actually why I'm very afraid to try to shoot on this, because this is ISO 3200 and it expired, like I said, in 1996, so it's over 20 years old, which means that I'm gonna actually have to adjust down by 2 stops, and I really don't know what the outcome's gonna be because this film already looked weird when it was new. Because it was made for extremely low light photography, so I guess we'll see, and I'll probably make a video about that. But it teaches you a lot more about photography because you have to be more mindful of the number of stops you have to adjust down. You actually have to pay attention to exposure times, more aperture times. You actually have to learn and know your camera much better because you can't just, on a digital set camera, for example, where it picks the ISO for you, you actually have to know how to set the ISO to something different so that way the camera won't just set it to the right one and completely screw your shot up. So it's a good teaching tool, but what if you already know everything you need to about your camera and how stops of light affect the shot, and what if you already have enough money to buy new film? Well, number one, check your privilege, and number two, because it looks awesome when you take a shot with expired film. This rustic look from downtown that I never would have expected to get when I took these pictures just brings out this sort of different look to everything. It's brown, but it's grainy and it's got character. When I shot on the slide film, it looks ugly in a naturally ugly but sort of pretty looking way. This shot actually was the one that I unintentionally overexposed and it came out pretty well. I was an idiot and tried shooting low light, but I mean, hell, it came out pretty damn cool anyway. It just ends up giving you this look that you really aren't going to be able to get with a digital camera and Lightroom. And you can't really even get this in camera with a film camera because the grain degradation just isn't there if you're shooting on new film, because the whole point of new film is the grain is the way it's supposed to be. And that's the biggest thing you'll notice when you look at expired photography, because the grain, on certain films there's a lot of grain and on other films there's really not much grain. See ASA 3200 before it expires and see ISO 100 or even 64 on slide film before it expires, and you'll know what I mean by a lot of grain and not a lot of grain. But because the film has degraded the way that it has, you get a very unique and very different look, and I honestly like it. You can go in and change some things up, pull out a bit more color. If, for example, you're shooting on tungsten film and you want to get it a little more natural looking, you can always pull out a bit of the blues or a bit of the tungsten color to get it a bit, more accurate to the shot. But if you're looking for an artistic aesthetic, this is the film to shoot with. The only other thing that really you have to make sure you do with these films is store them properly, because obviously if they're expired and they were stored properly, it's not going to be as big of an issue. But like, this film literally was given to my dad and then left to sit in a cat litter box in the basement where there was no cooling or anything, so obviously it was not very well maintained. So it has basically degraded the way you'd expect over almost 20 years. But just because it's already expired doesn't mean you want it to continue to turn to crap. So usually the way you want to store your film is to throw it in a freezer, and whenever you go to take it out, give it a couple minutes to warm up and then throw it in your camera, so that way you don't get condensation in your camera and it starts like making the insides all weird. But at the end of the day, when it comes to shooting on expired film, if you're new to the film scene and you've not really shot on anything before, Don't get me wrong, it's much more challenging than starting with properly stored and brand new film because you actually have to think a little more. But at the end of the day, when you do that little bit extra thinking, you kind of become a better photographer because of it. If I hadn't started on expired film, I probably wouldn't know nearly as much as I do right now about how to expose properly, how to adjust exposure to get the shot you want, how to nail exposure. God, I would never even touch slide film if I didn't already know how to properly expose shots. My God, because yeah, I'll make a whole other video on slide film. But yeah, again, like I said earlier, you have to nail the exposure on that. And learning what I did with the exposed film, or expired film, really did help. So if you are ever going through like an estate sale, or you're going through your grandmother's attic or basement or whatever, and you happen to find some expired film, don't be afraid to take it. Go shoot with it. It's a great way to learn. And the only bit of advice apart from that is don't buy it from eBay because they really will take you to the cleaners and overcharge. Either way, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like and subscribe if you are actually interested in this. I'm trying to make more videos sort of along these lines for this channel because I'm not going to take it super seriously. It's just a fun side project because I love doing photography and I want to build a community that is also interested in photography because of the fact that my other channel is not really interested in photography. It's mostly anime, but I have multiple passions and this is one of them. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And apart from that, I'll see you guys in the next one, whenever that happens to be. Have a good one.